Here you go, King.
Everybody, this is Donald. Donald, these are my parents.
It's a pleasure to meet you at last.
And they said, hey, you know what? We should get Good Times on to do their thing. He says, I can't get these people to sit in a room together, let alone in a show together.
John Amos revealed some actors he really couldn't stand before he passed away.
As I had with the producers of the show was that I felt too much emphasis was being put on JJ and his chicken hat and saying dynamite every third page.
While working on Good Times, he didn't hold back from calling out Jimmy Walker over their creative differences.
Sure, we had creative differences, as all cast members do about every project.
He didn't exactly keep many friends during the show either. And adding to that, he even had confrontations with producers, like Norman Lear, over misrepresentation.
Serious to the point that the writers they said, we can't deal with this anymore. And Norman called me up one day, we were on hiatus. The good news is that we've been picked up for another year. I said, well, I pretty much expected that. And he said, but the bad news is you won't be with us. And I said, how's that? He said, well, we had to let you go, John. He said, we can't have you threatening the writers.
So, what more could there be to all of this? Let's break it down. John Amos and Jimmy Walker worked together on Good Times from 1974 to 1976, playing father and son on one of the biggest black sitcoms in America. But off-camera, their relationship was basically non-existent. Jimmy said he never even had John's phone number. They never hung out, never talked outside of filming, and he couldn't remember having a single real conversation with John in all those 3 years. Once the cameras stopped rolling, John would just keep to himself and avoid everyone on set. The show's publicist, Barbara Buglani, tried to get the Good Times cast to appear on talk shows together, just like how MASH and Happy Days did with their full casts. But she couldn't make it happen. The Good Times crew wouldn't even sit in the same room together unless they were being paid to film. They'd rather skip interviews and promotions than hang out voluntarily.
Idea of what a black family would be and what a black father would be.
Jimmy admitted he knew absolutely nothing about John's personal life, even though they worked side by side for years. He had no clue where John lived, what he did on weekends, or even what his hobbies were. John would show up to the CBS studio right before filming started and leave as soon as his scenes were done. During breaks, he stayed alone in his dressing room with the door shut, and Jimmy quickly learned not to approach him unless it was about their scenes. Even decades later, nothing really changed. They've been to reunion events and fan conventions, but John stayed just as distant and quiet. Jimmy said the man who played his father on TV was still a total stranger to him. He even joked that he knows more about random people he meets at restaurants than he ever knew about John Amos.
I could not tell you what John did. I knew nothing about him. I know nothing about him now. I know more about the camera people in here than I know about John.
That silence and tension affected everyone working on Good Times. Guest stars could tell right away that the family on screen didn't feel like one behind the scenes. Directors had to work around the lack of connection, and crew members described the set as tense and uncomfortable, the kind of vibe that everyone in the TV industry talked about. Jimmy said John wasn't always like that, though. He'd worked just fine on the Mary Tyler Moore Show before Good Times, but something about Good Times really set him off. John came into the show thinking it would highlight positive black family values, but instead, the spotlight shifted to JJ's funny catchphrases and over-the-top comedy. That shift frustrated John deeply, to the point where it made him really hard to work with.
Now a man in pure dynamite!
He hated the scripts and felt the writers, who were all white, had no real understanding of black families. He believed they were pushing stereotypes and making the characters look bad. John often confronted the writers about storylines he found offensive, but things got so heated that his complaints turned into what the writers felt were actual threats.
After a few confrontations, Not physical confrontations initially, though I did offer to go if they want to go that way, you know.
Jersey.
Jersey. I just got tired of having their lives threatened over jokes.
John Amos was especially upset about how much attention the show started giving to JJ's character and his dynamite catchphrase. He felt like all the silly comedy was ruining Good Times and taking away from what it was supposed to be. A real look at the struggles and strength of black families in America. In a 2014 interview, John even said, "We had a number of differences. I felt too much emphasis was being put on JJ and his chicken hat saying dynamite every third page."
With the producers of the show was that I felt too much emphasis was being put on JJ and his chicken hat and saying dynamite every third page.
John pushed hard for changes to the scripts and constantly argued with the producers about where the show was heading, but he got so heated about it that people on set just started avoiding him completely. He couldn't stand watching his character, James Evans Sr., fade into the background while JJ took over the spotlight. The show had started as a story about a working-class black family trying to make it through tough times. But by the third season, it felt more like a one-man comedy show centered around JJ. John hated that. He believed it made the show look like a cartoon version of Black life and played into the same stereotypes he wanted to challenge.
Both of them up there with this family. We can use all the help we can get.
Norman Lear, the show's creator, was stuck in a tough spot. Good Times was the #1 show on TV and was making a ton of money for CBS. But John's behavior had turned the set into a really tense place to work. The writers said they were scared to even be around him. Lear had to make a choice: keep John and risk losing his team, or let him go to protect everyone else. In the end, he decided no show was worth that kind of fear. The crazy part was that Good Times was at its peak when John got fired.
Listen,
Serious
that's
to
still
the
not
point
funny
that the writers they said, we can't deal with this anymore. And Norman called me up one day. We were on hiatus.
The show was a hit, guaranteed for renewal, and everyone involved was making serious money. But Lear still chose to let him go rather than deal with more drama. John's character was killed off in a car crash in a 2-part episode that kicked off season 4 in September 1976. Something that shocked Hollywood, because networks rarely fired the lead of a hit show.
I regret to inform you that your husband, James Evans, was...
And it wasn't just John who had issues with the direction of Good Times. Esther Roll, who played Florida Evans, was just as frustrated. She once said, "JJ was written as an 18-year-old who does nothing, learns nothing, and thinks nothing." That wasn't just about the script. It was her way of saying the show had stopped being about a strong black family and turned into something that made them look foolish. After a while, she quit too, only agreeing to return later when the writers made changes to her role. While she was gone, Jimmy Walker had to carry the show on his own, but it wasn't easy. The rest of the cast wasn't exactly cheering him on. Most of them wanted to keep things serious, while Jimmy was expected to keep the laughs coming. It created this weird divide on set, where everyone was basically working against each other.
Anytime you say anything, they get crazy, they get upset. I said, they don't get it, man. This is what it is.
John's temper and controlling nature didn't stop when Good Times ended. Decades later, those same issues showed up again, this time within his own family. In May 2023, John's daughter Shannon came forward with shocking claims about her father being exploited. She said that at 83 years old, John was being taken advantage of by people who were supposed to be caring for him. According to Shannon, it all started when John called her from a hospital in Memphis, sounding scared and asking for help. She was out of the country but rushed back and found him in the ICU.
He was diagnosed over a year ago. We knew this.
When she got there, she said she discovered that John's Colorado home had been completely cleared out. Everything valuable was gone. Shannon also revealed that her father had been diagnosed with Lewy body dementia back in 2016, which made him vulnerable to manipulation. She accused his caregivers of isolating him from family, stealing from him, and using his condition to control his finances and where he lived. Shannon took her fight public. She worked with investigators and even launched a GoFundMe to cover John's medical care and legal fees. She said her dad needed major rehab and a safe place to live after leaving the hospital. She described him as one of the most generous people ever, someone who would literally give the shirt off his back, and said it broke her heart to see him end up in such a terrible situation. Shannon couldn't say much about the people she believed took advantage of her father, mostly because the investigation was still ongoing. All she could share was that they were caregivers, the very people who were supposed to be protecting John. Her statement hinted that the same people he trusted the most had actually turned against him. The people meant to look after him had become the ones who hurt him the most.
Doctor, my father's primary care in Colorado told us, your brother's withholding medication, he's not filling prescriptions, your father is going to die if he doesn't get this medicine.
So Shannon, let me ask you this.
So I believe, can I ask one last thing?
Go ahead.
But things got even messier when John's son, K.C. Amos, decided to fire back. He jumped online almost immediately to shut down Shannon's claims. He denied everything she said and completely flipped the story, saying their father was fine and being properly cared for. That's when the whole situation turned into a public family feud, one that exposed how deep the cracks in their family really went. Casey said Shannon's GoFundMe was fake and that she had no right to use their father's name for it. Before long, it turned into an all-out social media war. KC went public with his version of events, saying John wasn't being wasn't neglected, and didn't need saving. Shannon, on the other hand, kept insisting that her dad was being exploited and needed help. Their fight left everyone confused about what was actually true. Meanwhile, John's representatives released their own statement saying he was only in the hospital because of fluid buildup, not because he was being mistreated. They called Shannon's story completely false and said John was in good hands. But that only made things worse, because John himself started speaking up, claiming that his daughter was truly taking advantage of his situation.
My main issues are that I feel that I was, prior to entering the hospital, I had some ongoing issues with my daughter, who I feel has taken advantage of me.
It showed how bad things had gotten between him and his family. His publicist, Belinda Foster, started controlling who could reach him, which made it almost impossible for family members to know how he was really doing. KC kept posting online, repeating that John was fine and accusing Shannon of creating unnecessary drama. At one point, KC ended a post with just one word, period. That was it. No explanation, no room for discussion. It was his way of shutting the door completely, and it felt cold and final. It almost mirrored the way John himself used to distance from people back in his good times days, quiet, firm, and detached. Then came the most shocking twist of all. John Amos passed away on August 21, 2024, from congestive heart failure. But here's where things got strange. KC didn't tell anyone for over a month. The news didn't go public until October 1, 2024, and by then, John had already been cremated. Shannon and other family members didn't even find out from KC, they found out through the media. Imagine discovering your father's death from an entertainment news post instead of your own family.
Remembering actor John Amos. He is best known for his starring roles in Good Times and the TV miniseries Roots.
KC had arranged everything. The cremation, the handling of John's remains, all on his own. The cremation happened just 9 days after John's passing, and he didn't tell anyone else in the family. He kept John's ashes at his house and never called his sister or relatives to let them know what had happened. Because of how fast the cremation was done, there was no chance for an autopsy, meaning nobody could confirm whether neglect had played a part in John's death. For Shannon, it was like a nightmare. Just months earlier, she'd been fighting for her dad's safety, believing he was still alive and in danger. Then suddenly, she learned he'd already been gone for weeks, and nobody told her. The whole situation raised serious questions about why KC had kept everything so secret.
John Amos's daughter, her name is Shannon, came out and let the world know that, yes, she is in grieving and she is in mourning, but she didn't know her dad had even passed away. She found out through the media like we did.
The long delay before anyone found out about John Amos's death made people start asking serious questions. It looked like KC might have been trying to stop anyone from digging deeper into how his father really died. He kept John's ashes at his home and stayed completely silent about it for weeks, holding full control over both his father's remains and the story of what supposedly happened. Because of how quickly he had John cremated, there was no chance for an independent medical examination, which meant nobody could ever know if the health problems Shannon had warned about might have played a role in her father's decline. That rushed cremation became the biggest red flag in the whole situation. Congestive heart failure doesn't always happen suddenly. It can get worse if someone isn't properly cared for, or if their health issues are ignored. By cremating John's body just days after his death, KC basically erased any way to prove whether neglect or mistreatment had played a part. To many people, it looked less like a son honoring his father's wishes and more like someone trying to cover something up before anyone could ask too many questions. Then came the wildest twist of all. Shannon discovered that on the night her father passed away, someone pretending to be her had shown up at the hospital. That person, named Belinda Foster, managed to convince the hospital staff that she was John's daughter. Because of that, she was allowed to make medical decisions, access his private information, and speak for him during his final moments.
She named Belinda Foster, who is a listed publicist for John Amos, as well as one of the people that was isolating him from family, allegedly.
This meant John died without any of his real family by his side. The people who actually loved him had no idea what was happening. What made it worse was that Belinda wasn't just some random stranger. She had been working as John's caregiver and publicist, giving her control over both his personal life and how the public saw him. She was even the same person who'd been releasing official statements denying Shannon's earlier claims of elder abuse. So when Shannon found out that this same woman had posed as her in the hospital, it painted a picture of something much darker, like a plan to keep John completely isolated from everyone who truly cared about him. According to Shannon, this wasn't some misunderstanding. Foster had apparently been calling herself John's daughter for a while, using that lie to make medical decisions and handle his affairs without involving his real kids. The hospital staff had no reason to doubt her, so they gave her all the authority that should have belonged to Shannon and KC. This deception made sure that when John was dying, the people who loved him most were kept far away. The whole imposter scandal exposed just how isolated John had become in his final years. The same man who used to distance himself from his Good Times co-stars had ended up completely cut off from his real family, surrounded by people who, according to Shannon, only saw him as a source of money and control. With Belinda acting as both his caregiver and his publicist, she had power over both his day-to-day life and his public image. Nobody could get close to him anymore, not even his children. Shannon eventually hired attorney James H. Davis III to investigate everything, from her father's medical care to the strange events leading up to his death. Her legal team wanted to know if John had been properly looked after and if his death could have been prevented. They filed court petitions accusing KC, Belinda Foster, and another man named Eugene Brummett of elder fraud and wrongful death. What came out next was even more disturbing.
People magazine just reported that an investigation on the well-being of actor John Amos.
Records showed that KC had gained full control over his father's finances years before John passed. Back in 2020, KC had filed paperwork giving himself complete ownership of John's production company, Step and One Half Productions. That move meant all the money from John's acting residuals and licensing deals went directly through KC. Shannon's lawsuit claimed KC had manipulated their father into signing documents that cut the rest of the family out, basically taking everything for himself. The sad part is, this all sounded like a reflection of how John had lived most of his life. Distant, guarded, and unable to keep close relationships. The man who once avoided his co-stars on Good Times ended up living out his last years surrounded not by love, but by isolation and alleged exploitation. Jimmy Walker's old confession that he never spoke to John off camera during 3 years of filming now seemed almost prophetic. John had always been a mystery, even to those closest to him, and in the end, he stayed that way. John Amos died on August 21, 2024, alone in a Memphis hospital, while someone pretending to be his daughter handled his care. It was a heartbreaking end for a man who had once been the strong, proud father figure of black television.
Tributes are pouring in for John Amos, best known for his starring role in Good Times and the TV miniseries Roots. Amos passed away at 84. Now he's being remembered for the integrity and intellect he brought to the parts he played.
The same intensity that had made him a star eventually became the reason he was surrounded by manipulation and silence. The man who once challenged Hollywood stereotypes died caught in a real-life drama far more tragic than anything he ever acted in. Still, John's legacy on screen remains unforgettable. After Good Times, Norman Lear's company cast him in another show called Onward and Upward, where he played a congressman, though he eventually walked away from that too. Not long after, he found success again in the groundbreaking 1977 miniseries Roots. Over the years, he kept showing up on TV in roles like Will Smith's stepdad on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and in series like Hunter, The District, Men in Trees, All About the Andersons, and Netflix's The Ranch. On the big screen, he appeared in The World's Greatest Athlete, Die Hard 2, and Coming to America 2.
Here you go, King.
John Amos's story might have ended in mystery and heartbreak, but his legacy, both as an actor and as a man who stood up for what he believed in, still lives on.